Hey everyone, tonight we're taking a journey back to one of the darkest chapters in medieval life. Not the grand battles or royal feasts you see in movies, but something far more grim and forgotten. We're exploring what it was actually like to spend a single day as a prisoner in a medieval dungeon. And trust me, after tonight's deep dive, you'll never look at those castle tours the same way again. So before we descend into the shadows together, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You wake up not to the gentle sound of birds chirping or sunlight streaming through your window, but to the echo of your own breathing bouncing off stone walls that haven't seen daylight in centuries. The air is thick, damp, and carries the unmistakable stench of human misery that has soaked into every crack and crevice around you. Welcome to your new reality as a medieval prisoner. But here's what most people don't realize about medieval imprisonment. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about waiting. Waiting for trial, waiting for ransom, waiting for someone to remember you existed, or waiting to die. Because in the medieval world, being thrown into a dungeon wasn't necessarily the end of your story. Sometimes it was just the beginning of a very long, very uncomfortable middle chapter. Your cell, if you're lucky enough to have one to yourself, measures roughly 6 feet by 8 feet. The walls are carved from solid stone, weeping with moisture that never dries. There's no bed, no chair, no furniture of any kind. Just you, the rats, and a pile of rotting straw that might have been fresh when the last prisoner died on it 3 months ago. The floor is uneven stone, worn smooth by decades of pacing feet and pulled with things you'd rather not identify. Above you, a tiny barred window, no bigger than your head, allows just enough light to remind you that somewhere, far above, the world continues without you. During the day, this opening provides the faintest glow. At night, it becomes a rectangle of absolute, even somehow darkness that seems more oppressive than the walls around you. But let's talk about the most immediate problem you're facing: the cold. Medieval dungeons were typically built deep underground or in the lower levels of castle keeps, where the temperature remained constant year-round. And that constant temperature was bone-chillingly cold. Even in summer, you'll find yourself shivering uncontrollably, your breath visible in small puffs of vapor. The stone walls seem to actively suck the warmth from your body, and without proper clothing or bedding, hypothermia becomes a very real threat. Your remembers you exist jailer, if he, might throw you a thin blanket, but more likely, you're left to huddle in whatever clothes you were arrested in, pulling your knees to your chest and trying to conserve what little body heat you can generate. Sleep becomes a battle between exhaustion and the need to keep moving, just enough to prevent your fingers and toes from going completely numb. The silence in a medieval prison is unlike anything you've ever experienced. It's not peaceful quiet. It's the oppressive weight of stone and earth pressing down on you from all sides, broken only by the occasional drip of water, the scurrying of rats, or the distant sound of other prisoners coughing, moaning, or losing their minds. Sometimes you'll hear footsteps echoing through the corridors above, and you'll strain your ears, desperate for any connection to the world of the living. But perhaps the most psychologically devastating aspect of medieval imprisonment was the complete loss of time. Without natural light cycles, without clocks, without any regular schedule, your sense of time begins to dissolve. Minutes feel like hours. Hours disappear entirely. You might think you've been imprisoned for weeks when it's only been days, or assume a single day has passed when you've actually been there for a month. This temporal disorientation was often made worse by the feeding schedule, if you can call it that. Food arrives irregularly, Sometimes once a day, sometimes not for several days at all. And when it does come, it's barely worthy of the name. A piece of black bread, so hard it could be used as a weapon. A bowl of thin gruel that's more water than substance. Sometimes a chunk of cheese so mouldy, it's more green than white. The water, when you're lucky enough to get any, tastes like it's been sitting in the same barrel for months, which it probably has. Your jailer doesn't speak to you. Why would he? You're not a person anymore in his eyes. You're just another piece of property to be maintained at the absolute minimum level necessary to keep you breathing. He slides your meager rations through a slot in the door, if there is one, or unlocks the heavy iron door just long enough to toss them inside before slamming it shut again. The psychological impact of this treatment is immediate and devastating. Within hours, you begin to feel yourself becoming less human. The social bonds that define your identity in the outside world, your role as a parent, a merchant, a farmer, a noble, all of these begin to fade. You're reduced to your most basic functions, eating, sleeping, and surviving from one moment to the next. And yet, for many medieval prisoners, the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the mental anguish of not knowing what you were accused of, not knowing when or if you'd have a trial, not knowing if your family even knew where you were. The medieval justice system was notoriously slow and often corrupt. You might be imprisoned on the word of a single accuser, with no opportunity to defend yourself or even understand the charges against you. Some prisoners were held for months or even years before anyone bothered to remember they existed. Others were forgotten entirely, left to waste away in their cells while the paperwork that might have freed them gathered dust in some clerk's office. The lucky ones had families wealthy enough to pay bribes or influential enough to pressure the authorities for a speedy resolution. But for the vast majority of medieval prisoners, each day blended into the next, in an endless cycle of cold, hunger, and despair. You'd wake up, if you could call your fitful unconsciousness sleep, to the same stone walls, the same damp straw, the same gnawing uncertainty about your fate. The rats become your only companions. At first, you try to drive them away, but eventually you realize they're the closest thing to friendship you're likely to find in this place. They're warm-blooded creatures like you, struggling to survive in this hostile environment. Sometimes you'll even find yourself talking to them, just to hear the sound of your own voice and remind yourself that you still exist. As the hours crawl by with agonizing slowness, you begin to understand something that free people never truly grasp. Time isn't just a measurement, it's a form of currency, and in a medieval dungeon, you're bankrupt. Every minute stretches into an eternity of discomfort and uncertainty. Every hour represents another small death of hope. The boredom becomes almost as torturous as the physical conditions. There's nothing to do, nothing to read, nothing to occupy your mind except your own thoughts, and those quickly become your worst enemy. You replay every moment that led to your imprisonment, wondering what you could have done differently. You imagine elaborate revenge fantasies against those who put you here. You construct detailed plans for escape that you know you'll never have the courage or opportunity to attempt. And through it all, the stone walls continue their silent vigil, indifferent to your suffering, holding secrets of the countless souls who came before you and the countless more who will follow. Your mental state begins to fracture in ways you never imagined possible. The human mind, it turns out, isn't designed for this kind of sensory deprivation and social isolation. You start to experience things that blur the line between reality and hallucination. Shadows seem to move in your peripheral vision. You swear you can hear voices calling your name from the corridors beyond your cell. But when you strain to listen, there's only the eternal dripping and the scratch of tiny claws on stone. The walls themselves become characters in your daily drama. You begin to notice every crack, every stain, every irregularity in the stonework. That dark patch near the floor becomes a face, sometimes friendly, sometimes menacing. The water stains create maps of imaginary kingdoms you'll never visit. You trace these patterns with your finger until your fingertips are raw from the rough stone. But it's something to do, something to focus on, besides the growing madness that threatens to consume you. Your body begins to betray you in ways both predictable and horrifying. Without proper nutrition, your muscles start to waste away. Your teeth loosen from scurvy. Your hair falls out in clumps. Wounds heal slowly, if at all, and every small cut or scrape becomes a potential source of infection that could kill you. The medieval world had no concept of vitamins, no understanding of proper nutrition, and certainly no concern for the health of prisoners. But perhaps most disturbing is what happens to your sense of self. You begin to forget things about your life before imprisonment. Was your daughter's hair brown or blonde? Did you live in the house with the red door or the blue one? These details that once seemed so important, so fundamental to who you were, start to slip away like water through your fingers. Your identity becomes untethered from your memories, leaving you floating in a void of uncertainty about who you even are. The seasons change above you, but down here, it's always the same cold, damp eternity. You might catch hints of the outside world through your tiny window. The quality of light shifts slightly between summer and winter. Sometimes you can smell rain, or if you're very lucky, catch the scent of cooking food from somewhere far above. These tiny connections to the world beyond your cell become precious beyond measure. You develop rituals to maintain what's left of your sanity, counting your steps as you pace from wall to wall, reciting prayers or poems you remember from childhood, even if you were never particularly religious before. Creating elaborate stories in your mind about the lives of the rats who share your space. One you name Henry, after a king you once saw in a royal procession. Another becomes Margaret, after your sister, who you pray is still alive and searching for you. The physical act of staying clean becomes impossible and eventually irrelevant. Without access to water for washing, your body develops its own ecosystem of filth and odor. Your clothes, if they haven't rotted off your body entirely, become stiff with grime and sweat. Your hair becomes matted and full of lice. Your fingernails grow long and break, leaving jagged edges that you use to scratch marks on the walls, trying to keep track of passing days, though you're never sure if you're counting correctly. Disease is your constant companion. Dysentery from the contaminated water and spoiled food leaves you weak and dehydrated. Respiratory infections flourish in the damp conditions, leaving you with a cough that echoes through the stone corridors. Skin conditions develop from the constant of clay moisture and lackandliness. Every ache, every pain, every symptom could be the beginning of the illness that finally claims your life. Yet somehow, against all odds and reason, you continue to hope. Hope that today might be the day someone remembers you exist. Hope that a guard might bring news of your case. Hope that your family is working to secure your release. This hope is simultaneously your greatest source of strength and your cruelest tormentor, because each day that passes without resolution is another small death of that hope. The other prisoners, when you occasionally hear them, become both comfort and terror. Their cries remind you that you're not alone in this nightmare, but they also serve as a preview of your own potential fate. Some moan constantly, their minds clearly broken by their ordeal. Others rage against their captors, screaming threats and curses until their voices give out. A few maintain an eerie silence that somehow seems more disturbing than the loudest screams. You learn to interpret the sounds of the prison like a language. Heavy footsteps mean the head jailer is making his rounds. Light steps might be a servant bringing food, if you're fortunate. But that, someone, somewhere, is either clang of keys signals being brought in or taken out, and you strain to determine which direction the sounds are moving, hoping desperately that they're coming toward your cell. The concept of privacy becomes meaningless. Your bodily functions happen when and where they must, adding to the stench and degradation of your environment. Modesty, dignity, and social customs that once seemed so important are stripped away layer by layer until you're reduced to your most animal instincts for survival. Your dreams, when exhaustion finally overtakes you enough to allow sleep, become vivid and strange. Sometimes, they're beautiful escapes to memories of sunshine and freedom. Other times, they're nightmares more terrifying than your waking reality. Often, you can't tell the difference between dream and consciousness, especially during the long dark hours, when the line between sleeping and waking becomes meaningless. The weight of uncertainty crushes down on you with each passing moment. Will you die in this cell, forgotten by the world? Will you eventually face trial? And if so, what kind of justice awaits? Will you be executed, exiled, or by some miracle, freed? These questions circle endlessly through your deteriorating mind like vultures, offering no answers, only more anxiety and despair. And yet, even in this hellscape of stone and despair, the human spirit finds ways to endure. You develop an intimate relationship with pain, learning to distinguish between the sharp ache of hunger and the dull throb of joints stiffening from cold. Each sensation becomes catalogued, measured, almost welcomed, because it confirms you're still alive. The numbness would be worse. The absence of feeling would mean you're already dead. Your relationship with God, if you had one before, transforms completely. Some prisoners rage at the heavens, cursing a deity that would allow such suffering. Others find faith for the first time, clinging to prayers they barely remember from childhood masses. You might find yourself somewhere between these extremes, bargaining with forces you're not even sure you believe in. Please, just one sign that someone knows I'm here, just one hint that this nightmare will end. The hierarchy of medieval prison life reveals itself slowly. Even among the forgotten and damned, there are levels of misery. Political prisoners might receive slightly better treatment, their cells perhaps a few degrees warmer, their food marginally less rotten. Common criminals and debtors occupy the middle ground of suffering. At the bottom are those accused of heresy or witchcraft, souls so reviled that even the rats seem to avoid their cells. You begin to understand that your jailer holds the power of life and death in his calloused hands. A kind word from him becomes more precious than gold. An extra crust of bread feels like a royal feast. When he occasionally makes eye contact instead of looking through you like furniture, your heart races with pathetic gratitude. This man, who sees you as less than human, becomes the most important relationship in your shrinking world. The economics of medieval imprisonment are brutal and simple. If you have family with money, you might survive. If you don't, you won't. Wealthy prisoners can better food, war arrange former blankets, even books or writing materials to be smuggled in. They might secure cells with windows or braziers for heat. Meanwhile, the poor rot in the deepest, darkest holes, sustained by nothing but the occasional charitable donation from religious orders who remember that even criminals have souls worth saving. Your body becomes a calendar of suffering. That infected wound on your shin marks the week you tried to escape and scraped against the rough stones. The scar on your forehead records the day you collapsed from weakness and struck the wall. Your ribs show through your skin like a xylophone of starvation, each bone marking another month of inadequate food. You become a living record of institutional cruelty, written in flesh and bone. The sounds of the prison develop their own rhythm, a symphony of human misery that plays constantly in the background of your consciousness. The dripping water provides a steady percussion. Coughing prisoners add a ragged melody. Occasionally, the harmony is broken by screams from the torture chambers below, reminders that some fates are worse than slow starvation in a cell. You learn to treasure the tiniest variations in routine, a different pattern of footsteps in the corridor, a new stain on the wall where water has found a different path, the appearance of a previously unseen insect. These microscopic changes in your environment become events worthy of contemplation and analysis. you dissect them like a scholar examining ancient texts, searching for meaning in meaninglessness. The medieval mind understood punishment differently than we do today. Physical pain was expected to purify the soul, to burn away sin through suffering. Your imprisonment wasn't just about preventing you from committing more crimes or deterring others. It was about transforming you through agony, breaking you down completely, so that whatever emerged, if anything emerged, would be fundamentally different from what went in. This philosophy of redemption through torment permeates every aspect of your experience. The guards don't see themselves as cruel. In their worldview, they're providing a service, facilitating your spiritual transformation. The worse they make your earthly existence, the better prepared your soul will be for the afterlife. It's a twisted mercy that makes their indifference feel almost virtuous. Your fingernails become tools of documentation. You scratch marks into the soft mortar between stones, trying to keep track of days, though you're never sure if you're counting correctly. Some prisoners before you have left their own marks, and you run your fingers over these ancient scratches, feeling connected across time to souls who face the same despair. You add your own marks to theirs, contributing to a ledger of human suffering that stretches back generations. The concept of tomorrow becomes both salvation and curse. Each night you tell yourself that tomorrow might bring rescue, trial, or at least something different from today's monotony of pain. But each dawn through your that filters tiny window brings only more of the same, and the hope that sustained you through another sleepless night curdles into bitter disappointment. Yet without that hope, you would surely die, so you cultivate it like a gardener, tending a dying plant, feeding it with fantasies and prayers. Your memories become unreliable narrators of your past life. Did you really own that shop, or are you remembering someone else's story? Was your wife's laugh truly that melodious, or has isolation made you romanticize every pleasant moment from before? The line between memory and fantasy blurs until you're no longer sure which version of your past is real, and which is the desperate invention of a mind trying to escape its present reality. The rats that share your cell develop personalities in your deteriorating perception. Old Whiskers always takes the same path along the eastern wall. Three-Tail seems bolder than the others, sometimes approaching close enough to share crumbs from your meager meals. You find yourself protecting them from larger, more aggressive rodents, as if their survival somehow ensures your own. They become your congregation and you their mad priest, delivering sermons about patience and endurance to an audience that at least doesn't argue back. Sleep becomes your only escape, but even that refuge is compromised by the stone floor that never yields to accommodate your aching bones. You learn to curl into positions that minimize contact with the cold ground, wrapping yourself around your own body heat like a human furnace running dangerously low on fuel. Your dreams transport you to warm kitchens and soft beds, making the awakening each morning a fresh descent into hell. The medieval understanding of time as God's domain means that your suffering serves a divine purpose, even if that purpose remains hidden from your human understanding. Every moment of agony is measured and recorded by celestial accountants, balanced against your sins and weighed on scales you cannot see. This cosmic bookkeeping provides a framework for endurance, a reason to continue breathing even when every breath hurts. Your voice, unused except for occasional conversations with rats, begins to fail you. When you try to speak, the words come out as croaks and whispers. You practice reciting prayers and poems aloud, trying to maintain this basic human function. But the effort exhausts you, and the sound of your own voice echoing off stone walls feels alien and disturbing. The changing light through your window becomes your clock, calendar, and connection to the natural world. You learn to read the subtle shifts in color and intensity that mark the passage of hours and seasons. A slight golden tint might indicate autumn. The harsh white glare of snow reflection signals winter's arrival. These tiny variations in illumination become as precious as jewels in the treasure chest of your diminished existence. Your relationship with pain evolves into something almost philosophical. The sharp stab of hunger becomes a familiar companion that visits 3 times daily. The dull ache in your joints transforms into a constant reminder that you still possess a body, even as it wastes away beneath you. You develop a taxonomy of discomfort, cataloguing each sensation like a scholar studying natural phenomena. There's the burning cold that attacks your extremities during the deepest part of night. The grinding headache that comes from dehydration. The peculiar numbness that spreads through your limbs when you've been sitting in one position too long against the unforgiving stone. The architecture of your cell becomes as familiar as your own reflection once was. You know exactly how many stones wide each wall spans. You've memorized the pattern of moss growth near the base of the western wall where moisture collects. That particular stone with the chip in its corner becomes your North Star, a fixed point of reference in a world where everything else shifts and blurs. You trace the mortar lines with your fingers so often that you've worn grooves in the ancient binding, adding your own mark to centuries of forgotten prisoners who perform this same ritual of desperate familiarity. Your sense of smell adapts to horrors that would have made you retch in your previous life. The stench of your own unwashed body becomes invisible to your nostrils. The sour tang of spoiled food no longer triggers the gag reflex. Even the occasional whiff of death from neighboring cells fails to disturb your equilibrium. Your olfactory system has simply surrendered, overwhelmed into submission by the constant assault of putrid air. When a rare breeze carries the scent of something clean through your tiny window, it strikes you like a physical blow so foreign and beautiful that tears spring to your eyes. The guards develop their own mythology around you and your fellow prisoners. To them, you're not individuals with names and histories, but categories of nuisance. The screamer in cell 7, the one who throws his food in cell 12, the quiet one who might already be dead in cell 3. They place bets on who will break first, who will last longest, who will provide the most entertainment during their slow descent into madness. Your suffering becomes their casual amusement, disgust over their meals with the same detachment they might show discussing the weather. Your fingertips become instruments of exploration in a world reduced to texture and temperature. The rough grain of the stone walls tells stories of ancient craftsmen who cut and placed these blocks. The smooth spots worn by countless hands reveal the desperation of those who came before you. You discover tiny imperfections in the stonework, microscopic caves and valleys that become entire landscapes in your shrinking universe. A crack no wider than a hair becomes a canyon worthy of hours of contemplation. And so ends another night in the stone embrace of medieval justice, where time moves like cold honey and hope dies in degrees measured by dropping water. The prisoner's story doesn't conclude with dawn breaking through that tiny window, because in truth, there is no real ending here, only the endless repetition of survival reduced to its most primitive form. Perhaps tonight, as you drift off in your warm bed surrounded by the gentle hum of modern life, you'll remember that comfort is not a guarantee, but a privilege earned by the accident of when and where we happen to be born. Sweet dreams, and thank you for descending into the darkness with me.